Hi folks, welcome to today's edition of our videocast, My Life with Robert Burns. We're pleased you could join us. If you've watched the videocast before, you know that Jim Thompson and myself talked to some of our cronies from around the Burns world, and we'll let you in to hear what we're talking about. How you doing, Jim?
Doing great, Douglas. Hi, everybody.
For this episode, we're delighted to have with us the President of the Ayrshire Association of Burns Clubs. To tell us about her life with Robert Burns, please welcome Annie Small.
Hello, lovely to see you both.
Thanks for coming along, Annie. How's the weather in Irvine today?
It's been beautiful. And this dreadful lockdown thing, I go down Irvine Harbour every day for a walk and it's just absolutely gorgeous today.
Good, good, good. For those that don't know you already, Annie, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am 72 years of age. I started school in Salcoats, attended Salcoats Public School. At the age of 10, my parents moved back to Irvine. They were both originally from Irvine. So I then attended Bank Street Primary and then Irvine Royal Academy. And although my primary 7 teacher at Bank Street was a gentleman by the name of Joe Hunter, who was a great Burnsian, and the headmaster at Irvine Royal Academy was Alec Macmillan, who was president of the Federation, president of Irvine Burns Club. At no stage in my life did I ever get taught Burns at the school. It just didn't happen. I don't know whether it's because of my age group or whatever. And I think I heard on one of your broadcasts somebody had Willie McIlvany as their English teacher, and I did too, but again, Burns never came into the curriculum at all. When I was a wee girl at Hogmanay, my grandpa and his cups would get into Burns. My dad was president of Irvine Burns Club, but when I was a wee girl, it was the bank manager, the doctor, the minister, the kind of pillars of society that attended Burns clubs and went to Burns suppers, and it was all very much a male affair. And you saw, when I was wee, it was the important people who went to Burns clubs. So I had a kind of skewed view, perhaps, and I had no involvement with Burns at all till I was in my early 60s and went along to Irvine Lassies Burns Club, persuaded to go along because it was a good social club, and that's why I went along, and that just opened a whole new world to me. Yeah, but you know what Irvine Lassies is like, it's just so friendly and welcoming. Yeah. But as part of that, I gradually get introduced to Burns, and it was just a revelation, can't speak.
Well, we'll come back and ask you some questions about that, the connection with Burns in a wee while. But you talked about being at school. What did you do after school?
I left school after I sat my hires and I started in the Royal Bank of Scotland in Irvine. I don't know why I went into banking. I entered into a very bad relationship and had a very bad first marriage. And in these days, when you get married, you give up your job.
Yeah.
I was pregnant, so I was in quite a hard place. The marriage didn't work out. My first husband was put in prison for trying to murder me. So I had to fight hard to bring up Karen, and when I returned, I took various jobs. I worked in factories. I did lots of things. Eventually, I got a job with the Clydesdale Bank in 1972, I think that was. And I started in Coinning branch, and then I was moved to Irvine branch, and the bank were fantastic. Karen went to the Glebe school and came into the bank after work and sat and did her homework. The bank was really, really good to me. I met Neil and we got married. Neil also had a disastrous first marriage. So it took us a long time to trust people after what we'd both been through. Neil worked for Edmund Nuttall on the Hunterston Ore terminal at Fairley. And when that contract finished ahead of time, his job took him down to Peebles, where Edmund Nuttall was building a tunnel at St Mary's Loch for the Edinburgh water supply.
Right.
So I had to go into the bank and say, I'm sorry, I have to put in my resignation. My husband's job's taken us through to Peebles. And the manager there, his name was John Summers, another lovely man, a Burns man, said, well, why don't you get a transfer? And I said, well, there's no many Clydesdale banks in the Borders. And he said, well, there's one in Pennycook. If you want, I'll get you transferred there. So that's what happened. And he transferred me to Pennycook. Neil and I bought our first house in Pennycook, and Neil drove the 15 miles every day to Peebles. As I say, we bought our first house there, and I don't know if you two are old enough to remember Margaret Thatcher and the high interest rates.
Yeah.
But at one time, we were paying 15% interest in a mortgage and literally couldn't afford to eat, but we did it. I then decided I get involved with things in the bank, and I realised that if you wanted a cheap mortgage, a staff mortgage in the bank, you had to sit your bank exams. So I did that. I sat my bank exams, get involved with the union because women were not treated very well in the bank. Promotion was always at that stage men. So that's what I did. Then the contract at St Mary's Loch ended ahead of schedule and Neil was made redundant. So like me, he had always been very good at his job but hadn't any qualifications. So at that stage he went to St Helens College and got his diploma in purchase and supply. And good old Norman Tebbit and Margaret Thatcher told us to get on our bikes and find work. And as luck would have it, Neil got a job at British Aerospace. So the bank again were extremely good with me, and they transferred me back to the Foregate branch in Kilmarnock. And we bought a house in Dundonald. And at that time, if you got on your bike, they paid the legal fees, the government paid your flitting, gave you money. When I think back, it was amazing. But, you know, we were just like so glad that Neil had a job. But that meant I come back to Ayrshire, back near the family again. And once I was settled in the bank, I decided, probably because I'd been through such a bad marriage, my first time round, I trained as a marriage guidance counsellor. And I did that a couple of nights a week, voluntarily. And then I decided to train as a mediator. So I trained as a mediator, and I took early retirement from the bank when I was 50, because again, I was old enough. The retirement age was 55 for the option of going at 50. So when I retired from the bank at 50, I became a mediator for Family Mediation Scotland, working in Kilmarnock. just part-time, but I think that's the line of work I should have been in, being forced to sell in the bank. You sell to need, but you were told to sell, and you know the result of that, all the people who have claimed hundreds of thousands back to the bank because they missold things. So I'm ranting on too much, aren't I?
No, you're doing fine. Apart from there's obviously a lot of work that you've been involved in over that time, but did you have any other sort of hobbies and interests?
Not at that stage, no. And when I look back, because Neil played cricket as well as working, and he always worked overtime. And by the time you did the garden and you kept the house, and I didn't really have any hobbies at all till, as I say, I retired at 50, and then I started going to keep fit, joining walking groups, and it was through the ladies in the walking group that they said, why don't you come to the Irvine Lassies? So that's what kind of brought me into the Burns world.
Well, you're giving us a perfect link into the next stage when we'll start talking to you about the Burns world. So I'll pass over to Jim, who'll get you into the conversation about that.
Well, I've got to be honest, and let everybody know at the outset, I've got a bias here. For me, it's my favourite Burns club, and Annie knows that, and they all know that I just love them. I think they're wonderful. And every time I've been welcomed like a long lost son, and they made a really good friend of mine an honorary member as well, which I thought was a lovely thing to do. Will Morrison. However, enough of my blethers. How did you? I mean, you obviously started in Irvine Burns Club, and what was your story from there, really, in terms of Burns?
Well, as I said, I went along, and it was just a social night, and it's not always about Burns and the Irvine Lassies Burns Club. They cover lots of subjects, but there's always somebody gets up and does a reading. And again, Ango was wonderful, and a wonderful friend to me, and I'm so sorry I didn't learn more from her. But Anne kind of took me under her wing, and you went along and you just enjoyed it. But Anne would encourage me, and she persuaded. Anne was president when I first went along to Irvine Lassies, and she persuaded me to join the committee. And then once I was in the committee, Margaret Cook again, as you know, Margaret's wonderful. And we used to have afternoons in Wellwood where we all got together, and we would sit and we would choose a poem, and we'd all take turns at reading the poem, and the likes of Anne and Margaret would say correct how it should be done, and we had some lovely afternoons. And just gradually, as you know yourself, once you pick up a wee bit of Burns, you just can't help, you can't get enough of it. The more you read and the more you think about his life and what he did, and the way he understood women. I mean, he obviously had a very strong feminine side to his character, although he was a man's man, and all the different facets of him that you can try and understand. But he absolutely understood women. And I mean, as I say, you can't get, once you start, you can't get enough of them to try and understand the way he lived. And I mean, even Jean Armour, when you think about her story and you think about him, the way he kind of strutted about with the only tied hair in the parish, and Jean Armour coming from a relatively well-to-do family, and what she gave up for Burns, and you can totally understand our father's attitude to him. But it was a great love story, although a tragic love story, you know.
I mean, Anne Gaw has been very influential. I mean, she's no longer with us, as you know, but and I sit here as one of our pupils because it was her that got me involved with the Usher Association, I've got to tell you, and then pushed me on to other things. But the influence must have been there as well in terms of, because you obviously went on to hold office with Irvine Lassies Burns Club.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't believe it when I was approached to be the vice president, because I've never done any public speaking. I've never been an out there person. I've always been very reserved, I suppose. And I was persuaded to become vice president, and you do 2 years as vice president, and I thought, right, you just have to learn. And it was Joanne Wilson was president when I was vice president. And then out of the blue, Bill Nolan, we all know Bill, and if he's watching this, I hope he'll not be offended, but Bill is the original puppet master. And he approached me to reply to the toast to the lassies at the Eglinton Burns Supper. Now, I don't know if you know, well, you've spoken at it, Jim, but Douglas, I mean, the Eglinton Burns Supper is one of the Burns Suppers. It's formal. It's normally very well known speakers. So I thought, oh, no way I can do that. And Bill said, no, you're going to go on and be president of Irvine Lassies. You have to get up and speak. So will you speak at that? So Neil, as always, was encouraging me to do it. And the person doing the toast to the lassies that year was Gordon Cree. So I got in touch with Gordon Cree and I said, right, can you give me an idea what your speech is going to be like? You know, he's a comedian, he's a singer, he's an instrumental, he's everything. And he said, I don't know. I just got up, speak off the cuff, judge my audience. I thought, help me here. No, he just speaks off the cuff. So I had to do my best to get up and speak, and I gave my history, because my dad was the last provost of the Royal Borough of Irvine. My two sisters are born on the 25th of January. My grandson was born on the 25th of January. So I did a kind of bit of background, bit of humour, did a wee kind of getting at Gordon and Cheryl were just recently married. So I managed it and amazed myself that I did get up and speak in front of about 140 people. So that was really a baptism of fire, but that was the first time ever I'd got up and spoken in public. So for then, I went on to be president of Irvine Lassies and had a wonderful 2 years. And then Irvine Burns Club approached me. I can't remember exactly when I was approached. It was a good few years ago. And some of the views were, if I'd been a boy, I would have been automatically asked, because my father was a past president. There were a lot of the directors were not happy with the idea of a lady president, and I do get a row for saying lady president because you're the president, whether you're male or female, but I was the first female president of Irvine Burns Club, and that was another challenge. I think I managed okay, but everything was a first, you know. And then because I was president at Irvine Burns Club, I was invited to Co-Winning Burns Club to do their toast, and they'd never had a woman speaker before. So it's been difficult, challenging, but quite amazed myself that I've...
It sounds as though you've taken on many challenges over the years and just tackled them head on.
Well, sometimes, but as I say, Neil was at my back, encouraging me and helping me with my speeches all the way. And then it was you, Jim, that proposed me for president of the Ayrshire Association. And I'll never forget that night when somebody was put up against me that we didn't know about. And that was a hard one too, but I got there.
Yeah,
You did, and you've done well as well. I mean, I remember that night at Newcomnock. I mean, Newcomnock always seems to feature somewhere. But and to be honest with you, no harm to the body that was challenging, but
No, and he didn't know. He'd been told I was stepping down.
well,
That was a dreadful situation. But
the bottom line to it is the best person get the job, and you'll be finishing shortly, though, eh?
yeah, tomorrow is the AGM, and I hand over to James, and I've got great faith in James. I'm sure he'll be a great president, and he's bringing youth, which is so important. He's bringing youth and enthusiasm, because the Ayrshire Association, I mean, the two of you over the years, you did so much. I mean, the Laprake competition, when you think what the Ayrshire Association was, and I have tried in my 2 years, but it's hard to get the clubs come and participating. It's difficult.
I think part of the problem is that district associations, and my Ayrshire's the only one I've got any real knowledge of. District associations don't really know what they're there for, you know, and I think at some point we need to look at that and try and work out what their role needs to be. But that's not an easy challenge. That's not something that will happen overnight.
And Ayrshire's changed a lot over the years as well. I mean, if you think about it in the 90s and what it is now, it's just two different things entirely. But that's for me, that's been quite a good progression as well. And the one great thing about the Ayrshire Association is that they've always, and all my time involved with it, they've always helped and looked for a good programme for the schools competition to get young people involved. And I mean, I remember when the year you were, was it the first year you were president, you managed to get it for us at Irvine Academy. That was a great competition that year. Very well attended, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I mean, and Beth, she's been a fantastic schools convener. And this year, I mean, we could hardly cope with the numbers of contestants, which is great. But where's it going now? How do we keep it going?
Yeah.
You know, because you can't see this pandemic ending anytime soon. So we'll have to, I don't know whether children can perform and send that in to judges I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to keep it going. Yeah,
I'm sure there's a way, and knowing kids nowadays, they'll be capable of doing that.
Well, when Bobby was doing his videos, Bobby Jess was doing his videos, there was young people on that, and there were stars. And I don't see why they can't have a virtual competition where some young person gets their mum, their dad, their grand, whatever, to video them doing it and just send it in and it gets judged. I really don't see anything to stop that happening, because we live in an age of technology now.
Yeah.
Aye.
However, yeah.
Anyway, getting back to your own interest in Burns, is there any sort of aspect of Burns that you get more out of than others? You know, is it poetry, the songs, the characters, or whatever?
It's everything really, but I mean the poems, it's the way, it doesn't matter who you are, it just, you understand what he's saying. And I wonder that about poetry. I mean, has poetry always been, as long as there's been human beings, has there been poetry? Because somehow in you can talk and you can empathise, but somehow in poetry, you can feel more what the person's saying. Maybe that sounds daft, but I think poetry.
Yeah. Do you have any favourite poems?
Yeah.
Something there you could give us a couple of verses of, or?
This one's it's quite sad, but I actually read this at Neil's funeral. But the story behind it, it's the epitaph to William Muir of Turbolton, who was a true friend of all the Burns family, and he helped Jean Armour when she was cast out by her own family, forlorn, destitute and friendless. And Burns never forgot that. And he repaid Muir's kindness when his widow was struggling, and he helped Mrs. Muir through Gavin Hamilton. But it's a very short poem. An honest man here lies at rest, as ere God with his image blessed, the friend of man, the friend of truth, the friend of age and guide of youth. Few hearts like his with virtues warmed, few heads with knowledge so informed. If there's another world, he lives in bliss. If there is none, he made the best of this. And in that very short poem, there's so much there.
Yeah, tremendous.
Isn't it?
Yeah, well read.
Oh, thank you. But just if somebody is genuinely good in their heart and in their head and helping people, it's just all encapsulated in that.
It's amazing how much you can get into a short number of lines.
Aye.
Yeah, fantastic. And did you say there was something else you had as well?
Another, it's just a verse that I always think Burns teaches you to appreciate how precious each moment in life is. But pleasures are like poppies spread. You seize the flower, its bloom is shed, or like the snow falls in the river, a moment white, then melt forever. Again, very simple, but so true, you know, just kind of hits you.
Aye, very good. We applaud for that as well.
My Tam O'Shanter's always good for a round of applause.
Coming back to your time as president of Irvine Lassies and then president of Irvine Burns Club, how different are these roles? You know, do you have to perform in a different way, or is it a different thing to be president of one club as opposed to the other? Very different.
Very, very different. The Lassies is wonderful, and it's amazing that it took an English woman to set up a Burns club in Irvine a long time ago. But it was only set up because there were 5 Burns clubs in Irvine in 1975, and not one would allow a woman to go along to a Burns supper. So again, I hope I'm not going to offend people here, but Irvine Lassies is totally inclusive, no nonsense, down to earth folk. Irvine Burns Club goes way, way back and was always the more elite people in the small borough of Irvine's a small place, but you had to be somebody to be an Irvine Burns
Uh-huh.
Club. And although they've opened it up to the members, they have an annual celebration, and they do have musical evenings, but it's quite an exclusive club, Irvine Burns Club. I think that's changing,
Uh-huh.
but I may be standing on toes here, I don't know, but I think they're quite different from a lot of Burns clubs.
Uh-huh.
You know, sorry.
It's quite interesting where you have, you know, clubs of any sort, be they Burns clubs or any other that have existed for a long time. You've got to get that balance between tradition and moving forward correct. I know that at New Cumnock, we kind of pride ourselves in trying to change something every year. You know, that we try not to do the same things all the time, but we also try to maintain a lot of our traditions as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, Irvine Burns Club are wonderful, what they do in the community. And I mean, you've got Andrea Hagan, you had Liam McIlvany, you have good people being brought in, and the treasures and artifacts they have, it's just incredible that one small club has all these things and have been gifted all these things. You know, it's totally different. You think Jimmy Law in Skermley with his wooden spoon as his chain, you know, it's night and day.
Yeah.
You know, clubs can be so different.
And I think that's part of the beauty of the Burns community, the fact that, you know, that people get so much out of Burns that's different. Not everybody sees Burns in the same way, and equally, not all the clubs operate in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As my old pal Joe Kennedy used to say, the best thing about the Burns movement is meeting the people in it.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that.
Oh, aye. I mean, I've met some wonderful, wonderful people, and I mean the conferences, and that's another thing. You know, you hope that we don't lose that with the federation, and you know, sometimes you could despair, but I know there's too many good folk want to keep everything going, and we will keep it going. But it's encouraging the younger ones in, and that's hard. That's hard.
Can I take you back to something you mentioned earlier on? You were talking about, you know, involvement with the community and such like, and you talked about your heritage walks down the harbour. Can you tell us a wee bit about that? Because you've kind of extended from the Burns Club into more community activities.
Yes, well, that actually started with Ian Dixon of Irvine Burns Club, and he did the history, and Irvine Burns Club was involved with, oh God, I can't remember the name. It was Irvine Bay, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There was funding to do stuff down the harbour. And Ian did the history of all the buildings and the people who'd lived down there. And then he wrote a script, and then it was a joint venture with Irvine Lassies, and they put the wee blue plaques in all the buildings, and people can go along with their phone and get the information. And then the Irvine Lassies undertook to make it a walk where we have, you know, we start at the Pilot House or you start at Puffers, and you just stop at each building and give a bit of the history of Irvine. Which that was something else I had with me, in that there was a poetess in Irvine called Joan Kelly, that again, nobody, you know, I was never taught at school about Joan Kelly, and she died in Irvine poorhouse. She'd have published poems, but she died in the poorhouse. But funnily enough, it was, I wrote it down, wait, let's see. She died in 1898, and James Dickey, who was secretary of Irvine Burns Club and also the town clerk, when he heard she died in the poorhouse, he organised and paid for her funeral. And they had a parade in Irvine with the councillors, Irvine Burns Club and the Incorporated Trades, and gave her a proper funeral. And I've never been able to get a book of poetry, but one of the poems that she did write was, "What is life? A panorama, shifting scenes in various turns, sun and shade in quick succession, such the life of Robert Burns. In his youth he loved the muse, with her bright and cheerful flame. Now in every land and nation he has gained a wondrous name." So she, you know, there's this wee lady penniless in Irvine writing about Robert Burns, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny that all the connections you can make if you just know they're there. And that's the thing, that we don't always keep the history, and it gets lost.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I was talking, my son's flatmate, Nicola, works at the Maritime Museum, organising some of the events. And I was saying to her that I don't know if there's ever been in the history of the Maritime Museum in Irvine of any joint exhibitions with the Burns Club on Burns in Irvine and Burns in Irvine Harbour. Just think that would be quite an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah.
You know, looking at the kind
There
of
may have
boats.
been, Douglas, but I don't know. But it certainly would be an interesting thing going forward.
No, I just thought I've seen paintings of the boats that you'd see in Irvine Harbour at that time. And,
That's right. And of course,
and obviously the kind of things Burns would see on the Clyde.
Aye, his time with Captain Brown, and yeah, I mean it's hard, you know. This guy strutting about to Bolton thinking he was God's gift and was a poet was the same chap that was in the depths of despair and was writing to his father that he wasn't going to live when he was only 22, and yet he was out there with Captain Brown enjoying all his stories. It's hard to marry it all up, but then I suppose we're all at that, you know, we have our ups and downs. And
So what's next for Annie Small? What's any other ambitions in the Burns world?
I don't think so. I'll be there for James, supporting them, and no, just hoping to keep all the clubs and the association and the federation going. I think I'll be happy if in my lifetime everything survives.
I'm sure they will. I think this pandemic has allowed people to think about doing things differently, and I think there's quite a lot of stuff out there that we'll be able to achieve, even though we've got to do it in a different way. Yeah. Any other questions you want to ask Annie, Jim?
No, I think we've covered the stuff, but I would say though, and I say this, you know, straight faced, this has been one of the, and I'm not condemning anything we've done, but this has been a really interesting one because we've had a totally different slant on a couple of aspects of the Burns movement that we've never had before. And I thank Annie for our forthrightness and our opinions and our honesty in relation to that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Certainly. I mean, it was really interesting, and also a surprise to me the extent to which you have challenged things as you've gone through both your home life and your Burns life, which I think is tremendous. So more power to your elbow. And thanks for giving us your time to tell us about your life with Robert Burns.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, but I felt compared to your other people, I didn't have much to contribute.
Oh, I think you get a lot to contribute. So that was very good. Thoroughly enjoyed the blather. Thanks very much for your time.